nice building, right? But it's got a problem with accreditation issues. It's got a problem with the students actually achieving on the test scores. And I think Senator Hashmi, who no doubt will go around the state touting these credentials that she has, and she's very highly credentialed when you talk about her education, the end result of some of the positions that she's taken and some of the things that the Democrats are pushing is a real net negative for the students. And I want to make it clear, if anybody's listening to this, and I think we're sending it out on Facebook and on X, Twitter, I'm not beating up on teachers. I'm not beating up on principals. My dad was a Chesterfield County middle school principal for a number of years. My mother was a public school teacher. Both of my grandparents were public school teachers and a principal in Suffolk and Greensville County. I'm a public school product from kindergarten through 8th grade. So I value public education. I think we all have to be honest, though, and admit that we got a problem here. We can't wait another 10 years to actually address the solutions. And one of them, which Republicans have been talking about for a long time, is providing educational options for parents. You know, the parents who realize this school, for whatever reason, isn't working for my kids. My kids are not being educated. Senator Hashmi, in recent interviews with you guys that I have watched, she has said she's very proud that she stopped Governor Youngkin, from providing those educational opportunities. I think that's a mistake, and I think that's a problem. I understand wanting to protect public education. No one wants to obliterate it. No one's talking about dissolving it, but we're talking about giving parents an opportunity to take the tax money that they are paying, and it is a little bit of tax money in Virginia, and provide opportunities that will actually work for their kids. And I think that's a fundamental difference between the way I'm going to go to the Capitol and approach these negotiations and hopefully the solutions that we will come up with, and the kind of really strident position that Senator Hashmi has taken so far. In one of the interviews that Senator Hashmi offered recently, she said she thinks we're $6 billion in underfunding for public education. I mean, seriously? $6 billion? Does everybody understand how much money we're talking about? It's a $21 billion budget already for public education in 25 and 26 already. You've been the chairperson, and you're saying we're $6 billion underfunded. I'd like to know at what point you think we're fully funded, where every student has 12, there are 12 students in a class, and every teacher has this benchmark. Why is it that we can't admit that when we're spending $21 billion already, that the system may be the problem, and it's not necessarily the amount of money that we're spending? And I think you need somebody who is not beholden to the Richmond swamp. Can I be honest with you? I don't know anybody anything. I like Governor Youngkin. I like Winsome Sears. I like a lot of the legislators at the Capitol, but I don't owe them anything. I'm not beholden to them, and I'm going to come into the Capitol with a fresh set of eyes and hopefully create some fresh ideas that will break the logjam and create a situation where finally, in the short term, parents and students will have new opportunities going forward. And I have to beg Republicans and Democrats alike to show up at the Capitol at the end of this election with the right mindset, that we're not going to be at each other's throats, that we're not going to be vicious and nasty and mean. We're not going to stand there with a bullhorn and just scream about Donald Trump. Look, Donald Trump's in Washington. I got to fix what's happening in Richmond, and I got to make this a better state for Virginians. And it doesn't do us any good to constantly scream about Donald Trump when we have problems that we can address ourselves here. And I want to commit to the people who will hear me talking today and over the course of this campaign. You know I've got strident opinions. I mean, I'm a Republican. I've got very strong opinions. When you have my commitment that if you send me to Richmond as Lieutenant Governor, then I will convene groups of people, some of whom may not agree with me, to try to come up with these solutions. And I want you to watch this summer, because I'm putting together a series of meetings with policy policy experts, parents, business people who have a stake in the results of the problems that we're dealing with in Virginia, and it's not going to all be Republicans at the table. I would really welcome the opportunity to return to a place in Virginia where Republicans and Democrats alike can meet in a reasonable, rational, fair way and come up with solutions. And to me, one of the priorities in this coming 4-year term has got to be addressing these educational issues. And I'm very concerned that Senator Hashmi has doubled and tripled down on a lot of bad proposals. And we got to break them. And that's why I left the radio program. I left my salary. It wasn't just for publicity, because that ain't working out too well. And it wasn't to get rich, because you're not going to get rich as lieutenant governor. It was to really try to save Virginia from some bad ideas that have already wrecked other communities and other states across the country. So, having said that, hopefully we'll convene a couple of these over the coming weeks, and I'll have a chance to talk to you about some other issues. But I felt like education was one of the first things I wanted to talk about. It's something I'm passionate about. It's something my family has been involved with for years. And it's something that I think Senator Hashmi is going to present herself as an expert to the public. She may be an expert, but the results aren't that great. So I'm happy to take some questions.
Tyler, you're up first. If it sounds like you talk about these stakeholder groups coming at this with a more moderate approach than those who may have listened to your radio show or seen you on social media, is that part of your strategy as you head into this general election to portray yourself as more moderate?
Well, I don't know that I haven't been moderate. You know, it sounds when you're doing a 4-hour talk show, you wind up talking about the most controversial topics of the day at the very moment that they erupt. That's just the nature of that business. And you have to have a strong opinion, and you want people to have a passionate reaction to it. But I think people who've known me would say, you know, John actually listens to other people. Like I say, I invited Senator Hashmi on my program. It wasn't because I thought we were going to agree. It was because I would like to hear what other people have to say. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you. But, you know, in recent years, especially since President Trump has been president, there have been a lot of people who said, no, I'm not talking to Republicans. I'm not going to talk to you unless you completely agree with me. And that's just not my attitude. It wasn't my attitude on the radio, and it won't be my attitude as a candidate. And I promise you, as lieutenant governor, that won't be my attitude at the Capitol. I want to talk to other people. And I grew up in a time in Virginia where that was really possible. Yeah, I joke with people that my next door neighbor, when I was in Henrico County, was the chairman of the Democrat Party of Virginia. We talk about uncomfortable with our family being a Republican family and their family being that tied into Democrat politics, but we managed to get along. And doesn't mean we're all going to agree, but I'd like to at least start this campaign with that as one of the, with that as my mindset. And I hope people will appreciate it. I think Virginians want that.
Still more questions? Democrats have put out a statement, Abigail Spanberger, Ghazala Hashmi, and Jay Jones, talking about how unified they are heading into the November election. There's been a lot of talk about whether the Republican ticket is unified. Have you heard from Lieutenant Governor Sears in recent days, weeks, months? Can you tell us about those conversations, if there have been any, and are you guys going to campaign together soon?
I'm just going to be transparent with you. No, I haven't heard from him. And I'm disappointed in that. But what am I supposed to do? I have been doing 2 or 3 events every day in public. I'm talking about mainstream responsible positions that the Republican Party believes in, that I believe in. And as far as unity goes, we are unified on policy. For the most part, I'm sure we can find some things we don't agree on, but we are unified on that. And I just think that as long as I continue to be the kind of person who will go out and work hard and show you that I'm serious, not just about running for office, but about understanding the policies and concerns of Virginia's citizens, that hopefully in the short term we will all be together on that. We all, you know, to quote the Lieutenant Governor, we all have our race to run, and I took her seriously with that. I'm going to run my race, and I welcome Jason Yaris and Lieutenant Governor Sears by my side whenever we can make that happen. It'll be fine with me. ago, a couple of you asked me about the marriage amendment, and I said, look, you know my story, you know who I am, but I think the Democrats have crafted an amendment that is not acceptable. It doesn't provide protection for people who sincerely don't agree with gay marriage. I mean, I'm running to be the lieutenant governor, not to be somebody's pastor. But I've got to protect everybody's rights, and I don't think the way that amendment in particular is crafted protects everybody's rights. And I also think some of the wording will take us into this entire gender debate, which I think is really tearing us up and doing damage to the society. And so it's a no on that. I think felons who leave prison should certainly be able to petition the governor, as the current situation exists, to say, hey, you know what, I paid my debt to society, look at what I can present to you to show you that I'm a serious person and that I have reformed myself, and I hate these recidivism stats, they're not good. But if you really have turned your life around, absolutely, you can petition the governor and you can get your voting rights back. I think this amendment is a step too far, where you don't have to pay restitution, you don't really have to show that you've done anything other than mark time in the prison. I don't think that's good for us as a society, and I'm kind of suspicious that it's motivated by a voting bloc rather than actually giving us a better society. And of course, the abortion amendment is so extreme. I mean, even my friends who are pro-choice, and they'll argue with me about pro-choice, pro-life, and I'm fine with having a conversation. When I talk about the day of birth abortion, it would now be allowed. They say that's too much. So we'll have that conversation, but it's no, no, no from me on all three.
Yes, I have a question more so about your education goals. So I think a lot of people are kind of confused on what the options mean.
Yeah.
So if you present more options to families, what does this look like for all Virginians, wherever their economic status is?
Yeah.
What are those options, and how does it benefit every child here in Virginia? And then how does it impact teachers as well, and their jobs?
Yeah, the details are important. And I think what we've been stuck with for the last several years is a generic, I'm not dealing with that. No, we can't even indulge this conversation. I mean, I remember talking to Lieutenant Governor Sears on my radio program about this issue, and she was trying to get people on the same page. Like, can't we work this out for the kids? Can't we work this out? And the answer from Democrats was no. They had no interest in it. And of course, they will say that this will rob schools of money. I don't think that's true. I think what it will do is it will siphon off some people who have parents who choose to put their kids in other schools. I don't think that if we offer a stipend or the voucher program or the savings account, those are three different proposals that have been discussed hypothetically in that. I don't think that's going to rob this school. I think it's actually going to drop the number of kids who are in the school building, which in Chesterfield County has long been a problem with overcrowding. I don't know what the actual numbers are now, but I mean, when I was covering the news here, there were a lot of problems with overcrowding. And I think it will make it a much more manageable situation in the public schools, and it will allow people who might be locked into a zip code that they can't escape, that they can't afford to move out of, and give them some options to find a school that will match up. So, I left the 8th grade at what was then Byrd Middle School, Weokason Middle School now in Henrico. And I wasn't doing very well in math, just to be honest. So my parents said, how about St. Christopher's? Your dad went there, your grandfather went there, it's a little pricey. We made it work. They made it work. I didn't pay. They made it work, to be honest with you. And that was really imperative so that I didn't get stuck in a situation where I just wasn't getting the attention that I needed. And I want every Virginian, whether they're from Western Henrico or Eastern Henrico, whether they're from Bristol or Arlington or Alexandria, the Virginia Beach, I want every student to have at least a couple of options if they find themselves in a situation like I found myself in.
Thanks. I know we typically, because Virginia's election cycle, it's very often a referendum on who is in the White House. I know Democrats are tying you and the rest of your party to the Trump administration. I guess, how do you deal with them?
Yeah. Well, they sure are mad at Donald Trump, aren't they? And I know there are a lot of people who don't like Donald Trump. There's nothing I can do about that. Donald Trump is the president. I think he's making some tough, controversial decisions. I'm not going to lie to you. I've supported President Trump, and I will continue to support him when I think he's right. On the occasion that he does something that is troubling, I will be honest enough to tell you that. But this isn't about Washington. This is about Richmond, and this is about the state of Virginia. And I really don't think it's helpful for anybody other than to play politics to stand with a bullhorn out in front of historic events and celebrations of our 250th birthday and scream about Donald Trump. Let's get together in a room like civilized people, thoughtful people, and come up with some real solutions. So I get what they were doing in the Democrat primary. I know most Democrats are not Trump fans, and some people have a very visceral reaction. Okay, there's nothing I can do about that, except tell you, I'm John Reed, I'm a Virginian. I want us to get back to a place where we can have rational and reasonable conversations about important topics. And Donald Trump can do what he's going to do in D.C. I want to fix things for the Virginians if I go to the Capitol.
You mentioned problematic policies from Senator Hashmi on the education front. Can you give some more specifics of those, of what exactly she's championed or tried to champion that you feel have been detrimental in Virginia schools?
I think she's obsessed with the amount of money that's going into the program, which doesn't surprise me for someone who's committed to teachers and teachers' unions and the like. I think that's a big problem. But, let me tell you, the trans issue, and I try to be respectful. You all know who I am and my background. I'm not making a big deal out of being the first gay statewide candidate. I mean, I hope people, I don't want people to vote for me because of that. I hope they won't vote against me because of it either. And I hope you will know that at the age of 54, I've been through it. I mean, some people have really not been nice to me because of this issue. So it's never my intention to hurt someone's feelings or to harm them or to belittle them, to do anything to hurt people. But I think we need to be honest that this trans issue is a fringe issue, if we're being completely candid, and it is upending every way that we have structured society for decades, really causing huge conflict. And it's puzzling to me that someone like Senator Hashmi seems to have gone to the extreme left with her party on this issue when we can come up with some ways to navigate this so that if someone is 15 years old and they're dealing with this issue, that we don't disrupt everybody else in the classroom. And I will tell you, in my experience, a lot of people have said, gosh, John, you're so strident on this. You're right. Because when I was advocating for certain gay issues 25 years ago, I was talking about normalcy. Now, every gay men and women just want to be in society and be treated normally. No changes, no special treatment. And I think that's shifted. And I think we should bring it back to normalcy and come up with ways to work around some of the problems. So that is a big dividing line. It's kind of weird that that's the dividing line, but that's one of them that's really concerning to me. And I was in Loudoun County at their public school meeting 2 weeks ago, and you can see, you all have covered some of these issues in Hanover. Loudoun County, they're boys who were in the locker room with a biological girl. I'm not going to beat up on her, but she thinks she's a boy. She was videotaping those boys. Now, they've got a Title IX investigation against them. And I talked to the parents. It's really ruining these kids. I mean, I'm sure when they're 18, they'll get over it, I guess. But, this is not the way things should happen in the public school system. And as long as the Democrats continue to push these fringe issues, I think we're going to see real harm done to young people who come to school and deserve to be in a safe place, and deserve to get a basic education that prepares them to make good decisions as an informed citizen. We're so often in the Democrat Party, I think the mindset is to get into these social justice warrior issues instead of the basics that need to be covered to put people in a good spot going forward. I'd like to rein that in a little bit, in a reasonable way.
Would you want, like a school like this to approach?
Well, the bathroom issue has been going for, what, 10 years? So some schools and some public institutions have set up single stall bathrooms. And I'm not, one of the things I want to stress to everybody is I'm not really looking to micromanage everything from Richmond. I think some people go to the state capitol and that's their plan is, they're the geniuses and they're going to tell everybody in every locality how to work this. I think the problem is that we're indulging something that's factually not true in a place where truth needs to be the fundamental. So, if you are not a male, then I don't think you belong in the male bathroom. And if you're not female, I'm really sure you don't belong in the girls' bathroom. So that needs to be the starting place for any conversation. And unfortunately, the Democrats have jumped past that, and they're accepting things that are not factually true. And I feel bad about that. I feel bad about that for the students, the families. Can you imagine being a teacher having to navigate these issues? You have this kind of conflict before you even get to crack the first book and talk about history or math or English. That's untenable. We got to get back to finding what is factually true and basing everything on that. And I'm happy to work with people to try to come up with those solutions and not micromanage. But the problem with the party is they've gone beyond that. They've accepted things as true at all.
Laura, sorry, it sounds like you're sort of equating like issues of gender identity and also issues of sexuality. Do you see those as sort of the same issue, or how do you differentiate from those?
Well, I'm going to have a press conference on this issue because obviously it's been something I've had to deal with as a young person and as an adult, and I think it deserves to be fully vetted. I know that it's been something that Democrats have beaten me up on and some Republicans have had concerns about, so I think I'll save the larger conversation on that for that opportunity. But they are two different issues. Gender identity is different from sexuality, and I would love to explore that when we get to that.
Just one last question. So, if, for example, there was a trans student and then their parents wanted them to be referred to by teachers to refer to them by their pronouns or use the bathroom that they want to use, what would you say to them? Should parents be able to choose?
What's the truth? That's what I would say. What's the truth? I'd like for people to refer to me as Lieutenant Governor. I'm not Lieutenant Governor yet. And that's the truth. I'm not Lieutenant Governor yet. I'm a candidate. And I think we have to always go back to what does the law say for adjudicating controversial issues and what's the factual issue. Yes. I've got something in front of me that is so extreme that I'm going to focus on that. You know that I'm pro-life. I'm happy to talk. I think I'm in the minority in Virginia, to be honest with you, which hurts to know that I'm in the minority. But that's okay. I'm in the minority on a couple of issues. I think that the Democrats have presented a bill that is so extreme that that's what we've got to talk about. And it's this day of birth of abortion issue that we've got to talk about. And I'm ready to engage in that conversation. I think that's what's right in front of us, and that's what's so important.
And then on the repeal of the gay marriage ban, they carved out protections for religious state.
Well, here's the weird thing. The Supreme Court has already taken care of this issue. And I'm glad that the Supreme Court stepped in and dealt with this. So I'm puzzled, other than to play politics, I'm puzzled as to why we're spending so much time even talking about an issue that's already been settled.
Well, Justice Thomas has said that he'd be interested in turning that over, and then our ban in the Constitution would be effective again, so it would be banned here. Is that a concern?
It's always a concern. But I know I like and admire Justice Thomas. We disagree on that. And I don't think that's where we're headed anytime soon. And if we do head there, then we'll have an issue to deal with. I mean, I was working in the U.S. Senate when that original amendment was passed, 2006, and it put me at odds with some people in my own party. So you know where I am on the issue, but I just can't get distracted by social issues that aren't really relevant at the moment. And I think the reason we're discussing it is all politics.
I don't want to focus too much on the trans thing, especially since you said you would do something else.
Yeah.
But what about the rights of parents if they feel their child should be on puberty blockers? Is that, I mean, do you have a conflict with parental rights and maybe your own personal belief that this is factually correct?
Yeah. We're going to have to talk through where the society is on that issue. In general, the rule that I grew up with in society, not just in Virginia, is you don't let a 15-year-old do something that they might regret 5 years later when they're 20, and when it would be totally legal for them to make a decision. And I, as a guy who's been around this stuff for 30 years, I think we're making a mistake by indulging and acting like this isn't a really dramatic, life-changing decision. And my general belief in life is to protect minors from making those types of decisions that are irreversible, that they may choose to regret when they're 18. Now, don't get me wrong. When you're 18, you get to make your own decisions. And there are plenty of people who make decisions that I disagree with. I've made some decisions that people disagree with. Totally fine. But I think we've got to double down on protecting minors.
So not to piggyback on this issue, but I know the Supreme Court just announced the decision this morning, ruling that the Tennessee law blocking some transition surgeries or procedures for minors can go into effect. So I guess, do you support that decision? And I guess, would you support something like that?
I want to protect minors from making decisions that are irreversible, that when they're 18 and they're adults, they may choose to regret, or they may find that they regret. I think that's sound public policy. I really do. Even from someone with my unique background, I think protecting minors is something that most reasonable people in the state of Virginia certainly can agree on. And that's what I'll be campaigning on. And when we have this conversation, we'll delve into it a little bit more.
Anna.
What do you see as your path forward in terms of fundraising? You didn't have a lot of huge donors in the last cycle.
Yeah. I'm working the phones, and I think some people were kind of stunned by what happened 2 months ago, and they were waiting to see, is this guy for real? Is this guy really going to stand up to the establishment in Richmond? Is he going to tell everybody in power, no? I did. And they've been waiting for weeks, like, will this guy drop out? No, I'm not dropping out. I'm proud to be the Republican nominee. I've earned my way here, both politically and I hope when people examine my background personally. And I think now that we see the choice between Senator Hashmi, who, not to be unkind about it, is pretty radical within her party, and somebody like me, I think those people who've kind of been waiting to see how this is going to play out, we're going to start coming to. In Virginia and Republican activists, there's so many people across the country who are excited about this ticket because, quite frankly, it takes all the nasty stereotypes and it flips them over, and I think a lot of people are going to look at this ticket and give us a shot to at least listen to us as Republicans who wouldn't have done it a couple of years ago. And that's exciting too. And I think the money will come from that. That's why I'm working so hard. You know, I'd love to stay home in the air conditioning and just type things and put out position papers and never really put in the legwork and talk to people. But we've had some uncomfortable conversations on the campaign trail. But that's why you do this, is to talk to people. And that's what I'm doing.
When you say people are maybe get interested in the ticket, why? Because of its diversity, or
it's
what?
It's on the face of it, it's diverse, but it's a unique collection of people with different backgrounds. I mean, look, I laugh that all these people say, oh, it's the talk show host who got the nomination. No, I'm not. That's my last job. I was a senior Senate staffer for a U.S. Senator who was in the Foreign Relations Committee. I was a partner in a big PR firm and lived overseas during the Arab Spring. I went to Baghdad when the bombs were going off during the Iraq War. I was the communications director at the United States Chamber of Commerce, dealing with business people Fortune 100 companies, little mom and pop startups. I've got a real broad base of personal, professional, political experience that I'm bringing to this race. And when people hear that, suddenly their eyes light up and they realize this isn't a gimmick. It's not a PR stunt. It's about bringing a fresh set of eyes to these issues that have been bogged down in Richmond for such a long time. And I'm really enthusiastic and excited about it.
Going to education funding question, you relayed your own personal experience, how your parents helped you get to a different school because you needed a little more attention on math. If the voucher savings account proposals that Republicans have been trying to get across the finish line that falls through, I guess as Lieutenant Governor, would you support localities that need a little help with like hiring additional staff or special types of teacher aides?
Yeah, I think we need to look at that. I'm not saying, hey, this is the baseline and there's no room for additional money or that we need to cut that money. Education is really important. It's probably, like I'm saying, the reason we're starting here today is that this is what parents have been talking to me about. So if we have 5 or 6 really hot button issues, there's a reason we started with this one today. And it's not just to beat up on Senator Hashmi. I'm going to try to keep this a very dignified and hopefully positive conversation so that people will look at us as an example of how to run a good race that thoroughly investigates. But yeah, I'm not saying no more money for education. I think if somebody, if you're in a rural area where you don't have the same tax base, and you begin to see that you don't have the same student-teacher ratio, we should look at that.
To that point, keep
And-
saying with education.
Yes, okay.
A school like this that
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
That's not doing well, and you're saying, now you want to give parents opportunities for these kids to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Less kids in the school means less need for teachers. What happens to the teachers?
I don't know that it means less need for teachers. Honestly, I think that our whole goal is to shrink the class size so that there's more personal attention.
Right.
Thing.
But I'm sorry, I was a former teacher, so
Okay.
being in school, if
Yeah.
your class size is too small, they remove the teacher out of the classroom.
Right, but what is too small? I don't think we're going to get to the place where we got 6 kids with one
But
teacher.
there is a law that has each school has a ratio,
Yeah.
and if the class drops below that ratio,
Yeah.
then the teacher is removed. So I guess my question is, what happens to teachers? Are teachers' jobs secured? Can they go somewhere else? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I don't think that that's going to be a practical problem. I think we've got, in many places, overcrowding. We're talking about adding schools. Look at Richmond City. There's a lot that can be done around the edges there where I don't think teachers are ever going to be in jeopardy. We value teachers. We want people who are motivated there to help the kids. And I hate to tell you this, some of my friends who've been teachers for 20 years, they're walking. And they're walking because, they knew the paycheck wasn't going to be the best paycheck, but they're walking because they are tired of the lack of discipline. They're not empowered to take care of the classroom and deal with the problems in the classroom. I think we deal with those issues, and we're not going to have a funding problem. We're not going to have a discipline problem. And when we have this roundtable that I was telling you about, and I've already told a couple of people in Northern Virginia this. I want to talk about discipline in the classrooms and whether, controversial topic, right? School uniforms may be the first thing to signal to the students that we're not going to allow bad behavior in the classroom. Now, am I going to get my way on that? Maybe not. I think it's important for us to have that conversation. What are the ways that we can bring discipline back to the classroom?
I know
2 more questions.
Regarding the type of campaign you want to run, as far as I know, we have not had any set in stone gubernatorial debates. Or can you commit to debates with Senator Hashmi and how
I'm
many?
happy. I don't know how many we'll do. I don't want to tell you I'll do 20. Listen, I was on the radio 4 hours a day for 8 years. I was on TV 3.5 hours a day for 10 years. I got no problem standing up in a small room or a big room on TV. It's fine. We can talk about it. We'll work out the details, but absolutely, I'd love to talk to Senator Hashmi. And I hope that will be enlightening for the voters. And who knows? Maybe we will both learn something from each other with that conversation. Totally good with it.
Laura, last
I
question.
get your point that obviously you're not Donald Trump and you're not here to necessarily defend everything he's done, but he's certainly doing things that affect the Commonwealth, the federal workforce cuts, that sort of thing. Are there things he's done so far that you would say either, yeah, I think this is
Well, part of it, of course, is the tone, right? And when I've been in Northern Virginia, even back to when I was getting the petitions for to run, there were a lot of people who said, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to talk to you because you're a Republican." And I tried to engage. I would not have gone out, and Donald Trump didn't do this, but with the chainsaw. I just think that sent the wrong message to people in Northern Virginia. And I've lost my job before. It's terrible. I'm not mocking anybody. I'm not laughing at anybody. If you got to worry about whether you can pay your mortgage in 2 weeks and you've been given notice that you're out and there's no severance, oh, that's bad. I want to give Governor Youngkin credit. Immediately, he sprung into action to try to set up this website so that people who lost jobs in Northern Virginia especially could find potential replacements. Are they going to stay there 20 years with the same benefits? I don't know. But like I say, if you're worried about paying the bills and feeding your family and taking care of what's an immediate crisis for you, I think Glenn Youngkin instinctively stepped up. And I wish some Democrats had given him credit for that instead of criticizing. Because, Glenn Youngkin's not Donald Trump. Glenn Youngkin did that. I think he deserved credit. And we are $36 trillion in debt. Some tough decisions. I hate it, but that's the truth. I just hope that whenever we speak about things that are really hurtful to our fellow citizens, we show a little more some of the other guys. And I'm going to try to do that. Are we good? Hey, thank you. I know it's hot. Thank you for coming today. I'm happy to. I want to continue to do that. Being a media guy, I'm not scared to talk to you. And the team always says, I think not. I just want to talk to you candidly. Hopefully, we're to you. Yeah. Good to see you.
Yeah, the mic's off here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to take them into a strategy meeting, that's fine.
Yeah.